Have you ever really wondered what's going on inside someone's brain when they're struggling with addiction? It's not just about willpower, it's about wiring. Today, we're going to dive deep into how addiction is actually a biological process, a kind of deliberate, hostile takeover of the brain's most basic systems. We're going to break down exactly how this hijack happens.
So here's our game plan. First up, we'll get to know the brain's reward system. How it works when it's healthy. Then we'll see the hostile takeover in action, the dopamine hijack. From there, we'll trace the vicious cycle it creates and see how a simple choice can get rewired into a powerful, overwhelming compulsion. And finally, we're going to talk about why understanding all of this science is a total game changer.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the brain's reward system. Because, before we can understand how something gets hijacked, we have to know how it's supposed to work in the first place. Let's look at this built-in motivation engine.
So, let me ask you this. Think about that amazing feeling you get from your absolute favorite meal, or laughing so hard with your friends, or that rush when you finally hit a goal you've been working on. What's the one thing tying all those great experiences together? Well, the answer is a brilliant little chemical messenger.
And that messenger is dopamine. Now, you might think of it as just the pleasure chemical, but it's so much more than that. It's actually a powerful survival tool. See, when we do things that are good for us, like eating good food or connecting with people, our brain gives us a little shot of dopamine. It's like an internal high five, a message that says, yes, that was good for us. Let's remember that and do it again. It's the very foundation of what motivates us. And that brings us to section 2, the dopamine hijack. Because what happens when something else comes along and turns that gentle, helpful reward system into an out-of-control fire hose?
Okay, this is where the hijack really begins. Natural rewards, like eating that great meal, they give you a nice, normal little bump in dopamine. But addictive substances, they play a totally different game. They don't cause a bump, they cause a tsunami. A massive, unnatural flood of dopamine. We're talking sometimes up to 10 times higher than any natural reward. The brain is it's not built for that kind of hit. And here's the critical and kind of scary misunderstanding. The brain has no idea this flood is artificial. It just feels this overwhelming wave of reward and makes a simple conclusion, whoa, this must be the most important thing for survival I have ever experienced. And just like that, it starts rewriting its own priority list, putting that substance or behavior at the very top.
So this brings us right into section 3, a vicious cycle. See, the brain is an incredible organ. It's designed to adapt. But in this case, that amazing ability to adapt is exactly what creates this devastating downward spiral.
So to protect itself from this constant, overwhelming dopamine flood, the brain basically starts to turn down the volume. It makes itself less sensitive. This is what we call tolerance. And it's the reason why, over time, someone needs more and more of something just to get back to that original feeling. The goalposts just keep moving further and further away.
And this is how you get trapped in this really nasty loop. It all starts with an intense craving. Then there's use, which gives some temporary relief. But then comes the withdrawal. All those awful feelings of anxiety, irritability, just pure misery. And the brain quickly learns that the only way to make those bad feelings go away is to use again. So the whole motivation shifts from trying to feel good to just trying to stop feeling awful.
That relentless cycle leads us straight to section 4, from choice to compulsion. Because at this point, the damage goes way beyond just brain chemistry. We are now talking about physically rewiring the brain's entire command center.
Okay, so there's a part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex. It's in charge of all the smart stuff, rational thought, planning ahead, self-control. You can think of it as the CEO of your brain. Well, the constant stress and chaos from that addiction cycle starts to weaken the CEO's authority.
And, when the CEO isn't running the show properly, the whole company starts to fall apart. Impulse control plummets. That ability to weigh long-term consequences against a short-term urge gets seriously damaged. Making a good, rational decision becomes incredibly, incredibly difficult.
So you see the shift? What might have started out as a voluntary choice, something the CEO is in charge of, is now a compulsive behavior. It's driven by this overwhelming, hijacked need that's bubbling up from the rewired reward system. Essentially, the CEO has lost control of the factory floor.
Let that sink in for a second. The brain has been physically and functionally rewired. The actual circuits that control our motivation, our decisions, our desires, they've been changed to prioritize one thing over everything else. This isn't just a mood, it's a deep biological transformation.
And this all leads us to our final and maybe the most important section, why this science matters. Because understanding this whole process lets us shift our entire perspective, moving away from blame and towards biology.
So let's put all the pieces together. We've seen that addiction isn't some kind of moral failing. It's a neurological process, a disease of the brain. It kicks off by hijacking our natural reward system with a crazy flood of dopamine. The brain then tries to adapt, and in doing so, physically rewires itself until what started as a choice becomes a powerful biological compulsion.
And that brings us to the big question, the one I want to leave you with. If addiction is really a disease that rewires the brain, not a choice, how does that change the entire conversation? How should it change the way we talk about it, the way we see people who are struggling, and maybe most of all, the empathy we offer?